Have you ever been sitting on your couch, just mindlessly scrolling on your phone, and suddenly you get this, like, chilling realization?
That your smartphone is actively overriding your free will.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
right. You genuinely want to put it down. I mean, your brain is telling your thumb to stop. You have things to do, but you just keep swiping.
It's a deeply unsettling feeling, and honestly, it's one that almost anyone with a smartphone has experienced at some point.
Yeah, you're physically holding the device, but it feels like you've completely lost the steering wheel of your own mind.
Exactly.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into this fascinating educational framework. It's a unit on critical thinking that essentially serves as a literal survival manual for the modern attention wars.
And it is so needed right now.
It really is. Our mission today is to unpack the mechanics of how our brains are being hacked by the digital economy. But more importantly, we're going to explore this incredibly optimistic, concrete roadmap for reclaiming our minds and our society by the year 2050.
What makes these ideas so powerful is that they don't just diagnose the problem and leave you feeling helpless. They actually provide the psychological and economic why behind our daily digital exhaustion.
Right. They break down the invisible architecture that surrounds us every single time we open an app. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to defend our minds, we first have to understand exactly how they're being attacked on a biological level.
And to do that, we have to go all the way back to the psychologist B.F. Skinner and his research on operant conditioning.
Operant conditioning, that's basically how our behavior is modified by consequences, right?
Exactly. If you perform an action and it's followed by a reward, you're highly likely to repeat that action. But Skinner found something even more powerful than a guaranteed reward.
Wait, really? What's more powerful than a guarantee?
An unpredictable one. It's called intermittent reinforcement.
Oh, wow. Which
Yeah.
is exactly how our social media interfaces are built. I mean, they are not neutral tools at all. They're engineered to act like pocket slot machines.
They really are. You pull the lever, or, well, in our case, you swipe down to refresh the feed, and you just don't know if you're going to get a reward.
Right, you might see a boring ad, or you might get a hilarious video or a message from a friend, and it's that unpredictability that keeps your thumb moving.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't an accident of design. It is the deliberate monetization of human psychology. Designers use this intermittent reinforcement to create what behavioral scientists call a ludic loop.
A ludic loop! That sounds intense.
It is. It's a state of deep behavioral addiction where you aren't even thinking about the content anymore. You're literally just chasing the next dopamine hit. And to keep you trapped in that loop, the digital world employs these things called dark patterns.
Oh yeah, like the infinite scrolls. Or those ghost notifications that make you check your phone when absolutely nothing is there.
Right, or the unsubscribe buttons that require a map and a compass to navigate.
It's so frustrating, and all of this is allowed to happen because of how we currently view the tech industry. There is this overarching culture of, like, neoliberal deregulation.
Exactly. Because there's no digital equivalent of the FDA or the EPA protecting our mental environment, human attention is just treated as a raw, extractive material.
It's strip mined, just like coal or timber. The profits of tech corporations are completely prioritized over public mental health.
To really see the human cost of that extraction, the text gives us the story of a 16-year-old named Scott. So Scott is sitting in his room playing a popular multiplayer video game on his phone.
Right, pretty typical Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, and he decides to spend a few dollars to buy a loot box, one of those virtual mystery crates.
Okay, so let's break down the mechanism of what is actually happening in Scott's brain in that exact moment.
Well, when Scott opens that loot box, the screen flashes with bright colors and triumphant sounds. He wins a rare virtual item. Biologically, his brain is flooded with a massive hit of dopamine.
Oh,
It is identical to the neurochemical rush a gambler gets when they hit the jackpot on a casino floor.
that's wild for a 16-year-old to experience.
And here is the really insidious part. In the background, the machine learning algorithm running the app logs this exact moment. It knows Scott's cognitive guard is down, and he's biochemically primed for more stimulation.
And it strikes.
It does. Within minutes, the algorithm deliberately feeds him a highly targeted video of a flashy crypto guru.
Ugh, of course.
Right. The video promises secret knowledge, a way to get rich quick and, escape the system. Because Scott is still riding that manufactured dopamine high, his critical thinking is completely bypassed.
Let me guess, he buys in.
In just a few clicks, he buys into the guru's scheme. He loses his attention, his money, and his tether to objective reality. He was systematically processed by an extractive assembly line.
It is the absolute monetization of childhood. I
Yeah.
mean, loot boxes and algorithmic targeting introduce the brutal logic of gambling directly to minors.
It's incredibly predatory.
It honestly makes me look at the tech and crypto industries through a completely different lens. They're operating exactly like the tobacco industry used to.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. They're selling these highly addictive, volatile products under this shiny, socially acceptable disguise of financial freedom or building community. But underneath that marketing, the product is devastating to mental health.
That analogy holds a lot of weight when you consider that these industries understand the biology of addiction infinitely better than their consumers do. But the extraction of attention, this whole dopamine loop, is really only phase one.
Yeah. Once the pocket casino has you hooked, the system has to ensure you never leave.
And it does that by aggressively curating and ultimately fragmenting the reality you perceive.
I mean, we tend to think of AI and algorithms as objective, right? Like it's just cold, hard math.
Right, but that's a huge misconception. AI inherits the biases of the society that programs it.
So if historical data contains racism or sexism or classism, the AI just learns those patterns.
Exactly. And when these biased algorithms are put in charge of gatekeeping resources, it leads to automated discrimination.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, an algorithm might systematically reject resumes from certain zip codes, or deny loan applications to specific demographics, or even recommend harsher judicial sentences based on flawed, biased historical data.
Rah, that is so dark. And on a more personal level, on our daily feeds, this algorithmic curation creates massive echo chambers. The system prioritizes content that confirms your pre-existing beliefs, right? Your confirmation bias.
Yes, exactly.
I heard this brilliant gamified metaphor in the text that explains exactly how this works on social media. Could you break down the concept of the corrupt server admin?
Sure. So imagine you log into a massive multiplayer online game. Your goal is just to explore and interact with other players. But the algorithm running the game acts as a corrupt server admin whose only goal is to maximize the time you spend logged in.
Okay, so how does it do that?
To do this, the admin only spawns two types of items in your path. First, it spawns monsters. These are the hyper-partisan fake news stories and hoaxes designed to absolutely outrage you.
Oh, I've fought plenty of those monsters.
Right. And second, it spawns treasures. These are the opinions and posts that perfectly validate everything you already believe.
So it's literally orchestrating a customized reality just to keep you fighting and collecting.
Exactly. And crucially, this corrupt admin deliberately scrambles the communication channels so you never actually meet players from other teams. It keeps you isolated in ideological ghettos.
Wow. Because if you actually sat down and talked to people from other groups, you might realize they aren't the monsters the admin made them out to be.
Right, and if you realize that, the conflict would end, and you might log off the game entirely.
But wait, let me push back on this slightly on behalf of everyone listening. Isn't it partly our fault? I mean, I'm the one holding the phone. I have a choice to click the outrage bait or to put the phone down and go outside. Are we entirely victims here?
This raises an important question about personal agency versus systemic manipulation. While individual choice absolutely exists, we have to recognize that these algorithms weaponize our evolutionary biology.
How so?
For millions of years, human survival depended on two cognitive biases: paying extreme attention to threats, which the algorithm feeds with outrage bait, and seeking validation from our tribe, which the algorithm feeds with confirmation bias.
Oh man, so we are fighting millions of years of evolution.
Exactly. When a supercomputer is running billions of calculations a second, testing thousands of variations of a headline to perfectly target those exact evolutionary weak spots, exercising free will becomes incredibly difficult.
I mean, yeah, you're bringing a biological knife to a supercomputer gunfight.
That's a great way to put it.
That is terrifying. And what's worse is that this fragmented digital reality doesn't stay neatly contained on our screens. It spills out into the physical world.
It absolutely does.
It starts destroying our ability to agree on physical, historical facts. Here's where it gets really interesting, because there's a concept being discussed for the decades leading up to 2050 called hyperstition.
Yes, hyperstition is a vital concept for understanding our current era. It basically refers to fictions or ideas that become real simply because mass belief modifies human behavior.
So the fiction actually becomes the engine of history.
Yeah.
Like, say a rumor starts on a forum that a major bank is failing. It's completely made up.
Right.
But millions of people see it, they panic, and they rush to withdraw their money. And because of that mass action, the bank actually runs out of cash and fails. The lie literally funded its own reality.
Exactly. That dynamic is completely reshaping politics and religion. It ties directly into philosopher Debord's concept of the society of the spectacle.
The society of the spectacle? What does that mean exactly?
Debord argued that authentic social life has been replaced by its representation. We don't live in communities anymore. We consume images of communities. Politics and religion devolve into visual commodities.
It's the shift from actual policy to, like, the viral SmackDown clip.
Yes, exactly.
When you look at modern culture, you see this shift everywhere. The text highlights things like the rise of certain evangelical showmen, where deep theology and community care are completely replaced by televised, highly produced emotional spectacles.
Or look at places like the Pigafoo theme parks.
Oh, right. What's the deal with those?
The historical theme park model is a perfect example of the spectacle at work. Rather than educating the public based on rigorous scientific historiography, which is often nuanced and complicated, these experiences prioritize reactionary, epic, emotional narratives.
So it's more about overwhelming the senses than actual history.
Exactly. It trains the public to value intense feeling over verifiable fact.
And when you combine a population that is trained to value emotion over fact with the terrifying rise of deepfakes, the crisis deepens astronomically.
It really does.
Yeah.
AI can now create flawless visual and audio evidence of events that never happened.
Which destroys our most basic hardwired human heuristic. The idea of, I saw it with my own eyes. If you can't trust your own eyes, what is left?
It plunges the population into a state of paralyzing skepticism. If you believe that nothing is inherently true, then conversely, anything is possible.
That's a scary thought.
In an era of terrifying technological complexity, the human brain just cannot tolerate that level of informational chaos. It creates simple answers and clear patterns.
Even if those patterns are completely fabricated.
Right. This psychological vulnerability is why we're seeing a massive return to superstition, hoaxes, and pseudoscience. When people are overwhelmed, they rely heavily on the availability heuristic.
That's the mental shortcut where we believe something is universally true just because it shows up constantly in our curated feeds, right?
Yes. And you add to that the Dunning-Kruger effect,
Yeah.
where people with limited knowledge are mathematically more likely to overestimate their own expertise. You have a perfect storm for alternative realities to thrive.
So just to recap where we are right now, our biology is hacked by dopamine, our reality is being manipulated by corrupt server admins, and our society is retreating into superstition because we can't trust our own eyes.
It sounds incredibly bleak when you lay it all out like that.
It really does. But this is exactly where the survival manual kicks in, right? We aren't defenseless. There is a tangible, critical literacy toolkit we can use, like an antivirus for the brain.
Yes, and the first step in installing that antivirus is a fundamental shift in how we educate ourselves and our children. Teaching basic digital competence, like how to use a search engine or format a document, is completely insufficient now.
So what do we need to learn instead?
We have to understand the political economy of the web.
Meaning we have to constantly ask, like, who owns this platform and how do they profit from my specific attention?
Exactly that. Understanding the financial incentives behind the screen is a literal survival technique today. When we analyze information, we have to look for reputation, identify the author, and scrutinize conflicts of interest.
All right, that makes sense.
And beyond the source itself, we have to analyze the narrative bias using a tool called Narratology.
Narratology, that's the study of narrative structures, right?
Yeah.
How do we apply that practically to, say, our news feeds?
Well, when you consume a piece of media, you have to mentally step back and look at the scaffolding. Ask yourself, who has been deliberately constructed as the hero in this story?
Yeah.
Who is framed as the villain? And what themes are being repeated across multiple posts?
Got it. Can you give me an example of how that looks in practice?
Sure. For example, if a cluster of think tanks and influencers suddenly start talking constantly about the dangers of electric vehicles, it's not a coincidence.
Right.
It means that specific narrative, framing regulation as the villain and fossil fuels as the hero, has gained strategic financial importance for whoever is funding them.
It's about seeing the matrix. You stop reacting to the content and start seeing the underlying structure.
Exactly.
And there is another brilliant, somewhat humorous strategy from the text for grounding yourself when the digital world gets too chaotic: the grandma analogy.
I love this one. It is a defense of slow, deliberate thinking against the frantic immediacy of the algorithm.
The idea is really simple. Your grandmother is definitely more boring than TikTok. But that slow pace is actually her superpower, and it needs to be yours.
So true.
Engaging in intergenerational knowledge, listening to oral history, and practicing direct, slow observation of the physical world are vital anchors. They literally break the ludic dopamine loop we talked about earlier.
They really do.
In fact, I want to challenge you, the listener, to test this in real time.
It's an incredibly eliminating exercise.
Yeah, so just pause for a second. Think about the very last social media app you opened. Try to remember the first 3 videos or posts that appeared in your feed. Got it.
Okay.
Now apply narratology. Who was the fabricated hero in those posts? Who was the villain? Was there a repeated theme specifically designed to outrage you or validate you?
When you apply that lens, the invisible manipulation becomes glaringly obvious. Developing this kind of systematic scientific thought and the ability to instantly detect logical fallacies is the only common ground we have left.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, critical thinking isn't just an academic exercise anymore. It is the prerequisite for saving democracy.
Having a personal antivirus is incredibly empowering, but it leads me to a much bigger question. If we have to wear mental hazmat suits just to go online, why is the environment so toxic in the first place?
Right, why are we putting the burden on the user?
Exactly. Instead of constantly fixing the user, can we fix the system?
And this brings us to the visionary work of Anthony Biglan.
Anthony Biglan is an evolutionary behavioral psychologist, and his core thesis is profound. He points out that over the last 50 years, humanity has actually perfected a rigorous science of human behavior.
We know exactly how to motivate people.
We do. The tragedy is that this incredible science has been captured almost entirely by corporate capitalism.
It's been used to build the pocket casinos. Yes. It has been weaponized to foster addictive consumption, social isolation, and extreme political polarization. But the science itself is neutral.
That is the pivotal realization for me. We already have the cognitive tools to create massive cooperation.
Exactly.
The goal for 2050 isn't to invent some brand new psychological theory. It's to fundamentally reboot the system we already have. Biglan envisions creating what he calls nurturing environments.
And those would be in our schools, our families, our workplaces, and our digital spaces. Places where the default behavioral reward is for respect, rigor, and prosociality.
The focus shifts entirely to systemic prevention, rather than just scrambling to treat individuals after their minds have already been manipulated.
Precisely.
But wait a second, let me channel the skeptic here for a minute.
Go for it.
We're talking about a world where algorithms currently run on outrage, and we're just going to reboot capitalism to reward honesty. That sounds incredibly utopian. We just established that big tech treats attention like coal. They aren't going to just volunteer to shut down the strip mine. How do we actually overcome that massive lobbying power?
It is the defining conflict of our time. The main obstacle to this reboot is absolutely the lobbying power of big tech, which actively blocks public health protections to defend its profit margins.
Right.
But we have historical precedent.
Oh, the tobacco industry again?
Precisely. The tobacco industry spent billions manipulating science and lobbying politicians, but eventually public awareness reached a tipping point and sweeping regulations were enacted.
Okay, so what does that look like for tech?
Biglan's roadmap calls for aggressive, guided cultural evolution. It starts by legally limiting corporate influence in politics. It requires enforcing mandatory algorithmic transparency.
Meaning independent watchdogs can audit exactly how a supercomputer is deciding what information a population consumes.
Exactly. So it's not a fairy tale, it's a legislative battle. If the current deregulated version of capitalism naturally selects and rewards competitive psychopathy and deception, a politically rebooted system would legally and financially reward sustainability, honesty, and mutual support.
So what does this all mean for us today? The roadmap sets up a fierce debate between two worldviews. You have the techno-optimist who argues, hey, people are perfectly free to choose what they look at, it's all personal responsibility.
Right.
And then you have the systemic critic who argues, there is absolutely no free will when an industry spends billions of dollars to hack your biology.
Both perspectives hold a piece of the truth, but Biglan's conclusion is ultimately one of incredible hope. We already possess the instruction manual for human behavior. We know how the machine works.
We just need to use it for good.
If citizens can reclaim the political power to apply that science ethically, the exact same algorithms that are currently tearing our society apart could be rewritten. They could be explicitly engineered to reward scientific truth, human cooperation, and our common well-being.
It is such a massive paradigm shift. We've covered so much ground on this deep dive today.
We really have.
We started at the biological roots with B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning, unpacking how intermittent reinforcement turned our phones into extractive pocket casinos.
We explored the corrupt algorithmic admins keeping us isolated in echo chambers.
And the terrifying reality-bending power of hyperstitions and deepfakes. But we also found our anchors, using narratology to spot the fake heroes and villains, relying on critical thinking, and yes, remembering that the slow pace of our grandmas is actually a superpower.
And ultimately, we looked at the real legislative hope for rebooting our behavioral environments. It is a journey from realizing you are the raw, extracted material of the digital economy to becoming an active architect of the 2050 reboot.
Armed with this critical toolkit, you are no longer just a passive consumer reacting to stimuli. You have the ability to see the architecture of the attention wars.
And more importantly, you have the collective power to dismantle it.
Which brings us right back to that feeling of sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the screen. I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If we truly possess the psychological instruction manual for human behavior, and if tomorrow morning a brand new social network launched that was strictly, beautifully engineered to maximize your long-term happiness and cooperation rather than extract your momentary attention, what would your feed actually look like?
It's a great question.
What kind of posts would you see? And more importantly, would your dopamine-wired brain even recognize it as a social network? Or would you find peace entirely too boring to scroll?